welcome back to another episode of Streaking with Friends. I am here with a wonderful guest today, Melissa. So, Melissa, thanks for joining
Hi.
us.
Of course, the pleasure's all mine.
I'm so glad you're here. I know that you have, based on our conversations and a bit of pre-talk, I know that you have plenty of great things to share with us.
I think the best place to pick up the journey would be when I was a kid. I was very academically inclined. I was always the honor roll student. I grew up in a small town. Everybody knew me as that type of person. And that was great until I was 15 and got in a car accident and had a traumatic brain injury, which was closed head trauma, meaning my brain didn't come out of my head or anything. And it dealt with bleeding and swelling inside the brain, and I wasn't supposed to survive. So had
Hmm.
lots of hospital time, about 11 days, honestly. It was all that I was in the hospital. Did some reconstructive surgery because I broke pretty much every bone in my face, hitting the rearview mirror right across my eyes, kind of like I was wearing it as glasses.
Oh
Didn't
my
really
goodness.
have, yeah, I mean, I made it out of the hospital, obviously. Didn't remember the accident, still don't. 25 years later, don't remember most of the hospital time or any of that fun stuff. I do remember that after the accident, high school wasn't challenging anymore, or wasn't challenging like it had ever been challenging. But I had some issues with attention and with focus that I had not had before. But I thought it was just senioritis and wanted to get out of college or get out of high school and go to college. And then everybody tells you college is a different game. And for me, it really was. When I walked into zoology the first day and the professor said, "Who's read the textbook?" and two people raised their hands. First of all, we all hated those two people for the rest of, the 4 years. But I realized that I was not in the game. Like I didn't know what I was doing and I wasn't prepared for that. So the first year of college, I took it with that mindset that this is different. This is a new environment. I'm learning things in a different way. It's not, I went to a very prestigious school in South Carolina called Wofford College. And then it was a challenging school for anybody. And so my friends that went there from high school said it was hard for them too. So it was just a challenging situation to say the least. And I wrote it off the freshman year as it being college and college being different. Sophomore year, I was sitting in my dorm room reading a book for my literature class and realized I was 15 pages in and had no idea what I had read. I didn't know what I read on that page or any of the rest of it. And so I called my parents in tears. I have no memory. I don't know what's going on. Went back to Charleston to the neurologist and the neuropsychologist I'd seen after the accident. And they said, "Oh, yeah, it can take 3 years for brain injuries to show any of the side effects and any of your complications. Welcome to college." And that's when my 3 years hit. So I was 18 and all of a sudden had no short-term memory. I had no attention whatsoever. We've learned then that I had ADHD mixed with OCD and depression and anxiety and sometimes mood swings, which my mom said I'd had since the accident. Apparently, my personality at the accident changed and I didn't realize it, but I became much more aggressive and much meaner after the accident. Turns out the accident separated the front of my brain that controls your responses and your reactions and kind of gives you a level of how much anger you should have at the situation. I stubbed my toe and I'm, cursing God and everybody else, whereas really you should just be like, "Ow, that hurt." And so my responses weren't measured anymore. And that was part of the problem that my mother, bless her heart, had to deal with when I was 15.
Hmm.
All the doctors have wrote it off as a teenage girl thing because that's, not uncommon. But it was bad and it got worse. And when I was in college, it was even worse. Good friends, relationships, stuff like that, family, those are the ones that got the brunt end of it because, the people who are closest to you, you love the most, are the ones you usually treat the worst because you think they'll stick
Of
around.
course.
Yeah. And my parents, bless them, they did. They're awesome. My parents are fantastic. But it took a year off of school after my sophomore year. I went to a technical college so I could do the pharmaceutical test and do the studying and verify if the medicine was working at all. I was on Ritalin and Adderall at the same time for a while, and it just wasn't doing it for me. I felt like I was in a tunnel. I felt like I was not myself. I was medicated to, my wit's end. I took pills to get up and pills to go to sleep. So it was
Hmm.
not a situation I wanted to be in. And so I started researching tons of psychology. That was one of my majors in college, looking at ways to heal your brain, ways to do new neuropaths, and try and get your brain to fix the problems that it has. 25 years later, it's still a daily task, something I have to pay attention to and think about, especially with my mother. She still is a trigger, bless her heart. It's not her fault. She doesn't do anything wrong. It's just me. I am able to be nicer in relationships. I'm definitely nicer in friendships, but I still have issues with those that are closest. more often than not. I don't let them slide on anything. And I'll notice it when it's happening and I'll stop myself and apologize. Being a mother, this happens with my kids sometimes. I'll just lose my mind when they do something, they trigger me. And so my 2-year-old and 4-year-old, 2-year-old and 5-year-old, excuse me, understand the word trigger, and mommy's being triggered. Mommy's being triggered. It's like a joke in my house. Like, yeah, we'll get out of my office and we'll be just fine. But it makes it complicated. Every day you're fighting yourself. And I know we always say that, like, you're your biggest obstacle and you're the thing you have to overcome. And if you do Stoicism and Ryan Holiday, the obstacle is the way. Well, I am the obstacle and apparently I am the way, but I am also the hurdle and the roadblock on that way more often than not. So it's seriously a chance or a challenge to be aware and to notice triggers and to notice things that are going to set you off and to notice any kind of self-sabotage that you like to do. Like my thing, I know your big thing is, avoiding obesity and running every day, and that's your anchor habit. And I got so scared when I lost my memory and lost my ability to be a nice person that I started emotionally eating and gaining weight. So that way the excuse was that they don't like me because I'm fat, not because my mind is messed up, not because I have, a crappy personality or I'm mean. And that was always my fallback. Like, oh, well, it's fine. They don't like me because I'm fat. That's just on them. They have a problem. They're shallow. I'm fine. And it was never me having to address my personal problems because that was my fallback. And even now at 40,
Mhm.
like, I still find myself using that sometimes. The joke, I'm sure you've seen the t-shirts or the dish towels around here that say, God help you if I was skinny, like I would rule the world with this mind and this personality. If I was skinny, you'd all be in trouble. So like it's
Right.
the joke and we joke about it, but at the same time, like I know so many women who have that problem and they talk about body image and now fat is cool and it's okay to be any size and every size is beautiful and I'm totally with that. But my size is the way it is because I'm hiding behind it. I use it as a shield. And it's not a fun shield because, people will make fun of you. I'm not, I'm, extra large. I'm not that big, but people still will make jokes and make comments. If you wear a bathing suit, you go to the beach, whatever. And I grew up in Charleston, so I was at the beach all the time. And through high school, I was an athlete, like not a very good one, mind you, but I worked out. So I had the nice body in high school until the accident. And then I became a coach because they wouldn't let me play anymore, obviously. But I mean, that was the thing. Like, what do you do and what do you put up? What kind of defense do you put up to the world to try and make yourself feel better and to try and provide some coverage for yourself? And I found that, especially in the past 5 years, that self-sabotage is one of my biggest threats when it comes to doing stuff like this. Like my company was Blue Stockings, and then I changed the name just to Melissa Keeney to make it easier. And I have sabotaged that effort for 20 years now because I started it in high school. And since then, like even when I went and talked to youth groups and I went and talked to at-risk youth and talked to, women's shelters and whatnot, like I would sabotage every time. I would say something that disavowed and discounted whatever else I'd been saying. It messed up the message because I was so afraid to not be liked. And it's not that I would ever see these people again and their opinion really mattered, but it was that I just didn't want to be the girl that everybody hated and everybody was afraid of or that was mean or that was stupid or whatever. You create your own boundaries, if you will, and my boundaries were self-sabotaging boundaries. So that was kind of where it went and how I've realized recently that that was what I was doing. I mean, it took 20 years for me to figure out that's what my response had been, and 5 years now I've been trying to fix it. But again, it's a daily struggle.
Well, thank you for being so vulnerable and so willing to share. I would imagine just based off of the way you went through it, there were many parts of that that weren't so pleasant, right? I'm
Yeah.
sure there was quite a bit of pain through that. There were quite a few things that you mentioned in there that stood out to me. But one of the things that I'd want to maybe go back to is help me with maybe some of what you once you were aware that you didn't want to continue to stay medicated the way that you were. What type of adjustments or changes did you make, and how did that come about? Did you like raise your hand and say, "Hey, look, I don't want to be taking pills to go to sleep and to wake up"? How did that happen?
I mentioned it to the doctors. One of them was very open minded about it. He said, I understand you don't want to be a pharmaceutical junkie, I get that that was never your intention. And he was very considerate of my opinion, but he also told me that if I wanted to live the life that I had lived before, if I wanted to feel confident, and if I wanted to remember things and I wanted to be able to focus and do things, that was looking at this type of life, the medication and the pharmaceuticals and all that stuff. And I just completely decided that something else had to happen. So what I did is I started researching, and I'm sure you've heard of a variety of authors that talk about the metaphysical and talk about neurodivergence, both with ADHD, ADD, stuff like that, as well as how to rewire and restructure your brain. And like Dr. Joe
Joe,
Dispenza is one of the big
Joe
ones that I read.
Dispenza, Jim
Hmm.
Quick, yeah, the whole,
Right.
yeah.
Oh yeah, Jim Quick is great. I've found him in the past few years. I know we joke you have a library in most of your videos behind you, a very elaborate library. And I am a book dragon, meaning someone who buys the books with no intention of necessarily reading them, as opposed to a bookworm who buys them to read. And I took Jim Quick's class to speed read to learn how to get through those books to feel better about myself. And I still, that's another one of those self-sabotaging things. I buy courses, I go to classes, I invest the money in these activities, and then I don't give it the time that it needs and I don't pull through. So that's part of the issue with what I was working on back when I decided the pharmaceuticals weren't the path I wanted to take. So I realized that I had to come up with something else, and the rewiring of the neurons and all that stuff was it was challenging, but it was kind of like meditation. You just had to sit there and focus, and when you found yourself triggered, you had to change your thought pattern, and eventually doing that enough, kind of like with any kind of law of attraction type stuff or manifestation or mindfulness, you reset the negative thought when it happens. You say, oh God, I look so fat today, and you reset it like, no, I feel healthy, I'm alive, God gave me another day, I've got amazing family, I've got these kids, I've got these friends, like my life is wonderful. Yes, it's going to have struggles and challenges, but who doesn't? That's how we learn through the struggles, we learn through the hard times. And
Hmm.
so that was the mindset that I had to come to. And then I went to Clemson University and graduated and did really well because I had gotten off the medicine. I did a little bit of Adderall, I won't lie. Through some of the political theory classes, I did some Adderall to help with the focus because it was so much detail. But that was my life until probably 2.5 years ago. Was very focused on that. And then 2.5 years ago, I got pregnant with my second child. And after my first child, who was born in 2019, sorry, I'm not that old, who was born in 2019, we hit COVID the next year. And I had postpartum depression, but I was not going to the doctors frequently because of COVID, and I wasn't getting out of the house. And there was a good 8 to 12 weeks when my husband was, I have no idea who I was living with. I was stoic and not in the, enlightened sense of Marcus Aurelius, but I was very internally turned off and emotionally like absent from the situation. I got very frustrated with the child, though I never had intentions of hurting the child. That happens to a lot of women I know. And so when I got pregnant with the second child in 2022, um, I went ahead and planned for that. I talked to the doctor at the beginning and I said, look, last time, these are all the things that happened to me. I didn't talk to anyone because it was COVID time and there weren't unnecessary doctor's appointments. So I didn't come in, I didn't speak to anyone, but we need to plan something. And so I started a course of treatment and medication before I had the baby to try and avoid that. And now, 2 years later, he'll be two in November, I'm still on a rather regimented um, schedule of pharmaceuticals to help maintain the stamina of not being depressed and maintain the anxiety. And when I was in college and I was on the uppers and the downers and all the ADHD medicine and everything, I felt like I was in a tunnel. But I found now with this stuff that I'm taking currently, it's given me new life. It avoids the traps of the anxiety and the depression. I jokingly say I'm still stressed, so I still, have the signs of stress in my body sometimes, but the medicine helps me live a more balanced life now. So I don't know if it's the progression of medicine or the development and our R&D and all that stuff that's happened in the past 20 years, but I am not against pharmaceuticals now like I was back then, but I also am working to try and get off of them as quickly as I can. So I'm still working through the neurodivergent. I call them my pathways of despair, because you lead down one direction, it's anxiety, the other way is depression, the other way is just incredible amounts of, fear and worry and all of those things. And so I'm trying to notice the triggers and try to reset now so I can slowly work off the medicine again and go back to being more normal.
Well, that's interesting. And so, all right, so if we're doing what we can right now, right, and
Hmm.
if we are taking the steps that hopefully are moving in the direction of gaining more, more control and allowing for you to live with the balance you just described, what's happening outside of the medication? Help me with maybe some of the helpful practices that you've had or helpful
Okay.
exercises that you've done, because I think it would be great to share how those things have helped you to, I don't want to say cope, but helped you
Hmm.
improve on maybe some of the impacts that you've had, which again, let's be reminded, you weren't expected to live, right?
Right, right.
That's a pretty severe condition that that to be recovered from. And I think it's incredible that you're even able to do what you are doing today. And I'm
Oh
sure
yeah.
you feel grateful for that. But talk to us about some other maybe non-medicated activities or practices that you've done.
Oh, I do a big thing of meditation. That's a really big important thing for me in the mornings. First thing when I wake up, if I'm with my kid, it's laying in the bed next to one of them because they're always in the room with me. So focusing on breathing, on shutting your brain down, shutting your mind down. And for anybody who's new to meditation, don't expect to be able to be quiet in your mind at first. Like you can say however you want to. You can breathe in and breathe out and focus on your breathing, but your mind is always going to shoot things at you. And I generally say it's, a woman would have a harder time meditating than a man, because how many times have I asked like my husband or my friend, my male friends, like, what are you thinking? And they say nothing. And I'm like, seriously? And they're like, yeah, yeah, nothing. And I'm like, I can't do that. So, we have all these thoughts all the time, kid stuff, what I have to do, my to-do list, work, whatever. But it's important to quiet that and to be able to slowly start your day. I like to say on an empty slate. Start the day new. Whatever stress rolled in from the day before, whatever I didn't get rid of overnight, whatever I didn't get rid of with my evening meditation, any other anxiety that's piled on. Like in the first thing in the morning is meditation, minimum 15 minutes. Like it has to happen. I also am big on prayer, very spiritual. So I like to talk to God, you can call it the universe, source energy, whatever you want to call it. But I like to connect and to align myself in the mornings with the greater powers. So that way I'm not facing the day alone. And I do feel more at peace and more connected to those things around me. And it makes my temper much less likely to pop up, which is great because that's one of the things I work on a daily basis. I also, this is funny, I also enjoy coloring when I get stressed, especially doing work calls because the ADHD will kick in and I'm bored and not paying attention. So I have adult coloring books that I'll color in, fun little sayings. I do paint by numbers now because I'm trying to find creative outlets, things that I can do that bring me joy and aren't just temporary. They're not passing. Like, I love to go out and drink wine. Right now, I'm in the parking lot of one of my favorite wine places because it was where I wanted to go to get ready for this, go see some friends, catch up, talk, and whatever. And so I like to do things that aren't alcoholic or don't require alcohol and are a bit healthier. So I started with a paint by numbers thing. I've got a new house we're getting ready to move into. So I've got to decorate that. So I'm doing that. Legos for adults. Like I know people joke about Legos, but I've found it's really gives you time to think. Like I know you like to run, and I'm guessing that when you run, your mind becomes freer and you have revelations, you come up with amazing thoughts, you have creative ideas and whatnot. When I do Legos, I get the same thing and I don't hurt my knee. So it's fantastic. Usually I don't hurt my knee. Most of the time. But it's not my anchor habit. Don't get me wrong. It's not my anchor habit. I do go to the gym. I do work out. That, and I was talking to my psychiatrist today actually. The gym has given me I want to say it's not artificial, but it's given me a feeling of control again because I go to the gym, I do whatever it is I do at the gym that day, and I made the decision. And so, like, my friend told me the one that motivated me to go when she started going to the gym like a year and a half ago, she said, I joined the gym and I made myself go every day. I didn't have to go inside. I just had to go to the gym, get in the parking lot. I'm here. Yay, go me, awesome. And she's like, then after a week or two, I made myself go inside and check in. I had to go check in at the gym. And then I could go to the bathroom and leave. I could go sit in a massage chair and leave. I could go walk on a treadmill or do whatever. And I could be there for 5 or 10 minutes, and it was fine because I went inside the gym. And then the next week, she's like, okay, now we're going to go inside the gym for 15 minutes and we're going to do something. And I was like, well, the massage chairs only run for 10. What on earth did you do? And she's like, walk on the treadmill for 5 minutes, talk to the guy at the desk, buy a bottle of water, anything to get yourself there. And I found I went to the gym the first day. I used to work out at this gym all the time. So I went in. There weren't that many people. I did fine the first day. I was there for 45 minutes, did a great workout, got in the car, went home. It was like, yay, did a TikTok video. Y'all, I'm amazing. Look what I did. I went to the gym. 2 days later, I went back to the gym and there were so many people there. And every time I looked up, somebody was looking at me and I had an absolute panic attack in the gym. And so I had to leave, like get myself out of the gym into the car. And I did another TikTok video, like practically crying, going, I lost my mind at the gym today. Then the process was overcoming that. Like my panic attack was not enough. So now when I go to the gym, I notice people looking at me and I go to Planet Fitness and they have this big thing. I don't remember what they call it, but it's a no judgment zone. That's their big selling point. And so I look at the guys, like this guy the other day was looking at me and I was like, don't judge me. I have no idea what I'm doing. And he walked over, he's like, well, what are you trying to do? I can help you. And that was great because he was so nice. And like, I'm just sitting there thinking, oh my God, they're looking at me thinking she has no clue what she's doing. Why is she even here? Like, this is ridiculous. And he was super nice and helped me do some hip thrusts and some lifts and stuff with the free weights. And that was fantastic. So you have to remember that there was a saying that people don't think about you as much as you think they do. And just because they're looking at you doesn't mean they're actually paying attention to you. So, it's getting out of our heads and getting away from that fear and that ego that lives in our head that says, you're not who you think you are, you're not attractive, you're not thin, you're not this, you're not that. And I always thought it was funny for God to give us a voice in our head, a roommate that lives inside our mind that's not on our side. Like, how many times a day does your ego say, oh, way to go, that was great, you really nailed that, knocked it out of the park, good job? Or how many times a day does your ego go, oh, well, I don't know what you were thinking there, like, that was the dumbest thing you could have possibly done? Or, like, when we hang up from this podcast tonight, I am going to think of 85,000 other things I could have said that would have been better, or wittier, or funnier, or possibly had more impact. And then that's going to be my thought tonight. So I'm going to have to go home and meditate for a long time and be like, it's okay. Jason will be fine. His podcast will survive. We're not ruining it. But yeah, that's kind of the getting out of your own headspace focus. The roommate in your head is not your friend. And it's also thoughts are not facts. So anything you think through the day doesn't make it real just because you're thinking it. Those guys looking at you in the gym aren't actually judging you. They're just kind of looking, wondering when you're going to get done with that machine because they're ready to use it. So, simple stuff like that. Making it so that you are your own cheerleader, you're your own support team, and you're your own friend, which is the biggest thing.
Yeah, that's really good. I like some of the elements of what you just shared. So I'm going to make a quick plug about the anchor habit, and part of the reason why is a healthy way to leverage human behavior and lean into the way that our minds naturally work, which is you want to remove as many possible outside distractions as you can, right? So the anxiety that develops when you feel like you're, a point of attention for someone else, you remove that if you don't actually go to the gym, right? So you just walk to the end of your driveway and just keep walking, right?
Exactly.
And you walk for 5 minutes away and 5 minutes back home. And I've recently spent enough time boiling it down to what I would actually like for the anchor habit to be thought of initially, right? And what I mean by initially is I would literally like for it to be thought of as a 10-minute walk in silence,
Oh, I like
period.
it.
A 10-minute walk in silence on a daily basis. I don't want the beginner, the person who's newly introduced to the concept, to think anything beyond that. And the reason that's so important is because if I or anyone else begin inserting my own personal experience with the anchor habit, or if I begin inserting certain instructions around it, or if I start telling you what you're going to do or what you're going to expect and all these other things, then that individual is experiencing reality filtered through my perspective. When in fact, the entire design of it is for me to encourage people to begin experiencing reality filtered through only their own perspective. And so, how do we develop a pattern, develop a human behavior pattern on a regular basis that lets us look at ourselves
Mm-hmm.
sincerely and objectively without judgment? So,
Yes.
some of what you just mentioned there was the idea of maybe the voice in your head doesn't have your best interest at heart, or maybe it
Mm-hmm.
has these negative things to say. And the goal or the intention that you might have is to flip it around and maybe insert a positive thought in place
Mm-hmm.
of the negative thought. I would want to take a step back from that and suggest that instead of trying to adjust the thought,
Mm-hmm.
instead of trying to flip it from a negative thought to a positive thought, simply acknowledge that you're having the negative thought and then watch it pass by,
Mm-hmm.
which it will. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So any of the thoughts that you have are temporary. Okay.
Right.
If we don't have enough focus and enough attention to focus on good things for an extended period of time, we also don't have enough focus and attention to focus on negative things for an extended period of time if we shine a light brightly on it, right? And so that to me is part of the psychology
Mm-hmm.
of the anchor habit. And so what I expect to happen is that all I need to do is push that button, which initiates that activity, right? So once
Right.
I initiate the activity, then I expect that human behavior is going to take over. I don't know what you're going to do next or how you're going to build on it or how you're going to develop it or what you're going to do subsequent to it. But my role is to get you to start and is to get you to continue. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I want you to start and then I want you to not stop. Okay.
Right.
That's it.
It's simple.
That's all
That
it is.
easy. Right.
That's the simplicity of it. And to me, the beauty behind that is, and to your point earlier, Melissa, is oftentimes we live with these judgments of judging ourselves
Mm-hmm.
and thinking that others are judging us as well. And to also to your point, most of the time they have their own narrative that's going on in their own head that is what? It's self-conscious, right? They have their own self-conscious thoughts that are happening. They're probably thinking the same thing in the other direction, right? I wonder
Yeah.
why she's looking at me that way. I wonder
Oh
why
yeah.
she's judging me that way. Cool. Thank you for listening to all of
Of
that.
course.
Hopefully there was some value there.
Definitely.
One thing that I ask is, and as you know, again, the name of the podcast, Streaking with Friends, is this idea of stripping down, right? This idea of further exploring the depths of who we are. So the next question I might have, or the next kind of area I would like for you to maybe think through and share some thoughts is, when for you, Melissa, have there been times when maybe you've had, maybe to your point, a bit of a new revelation or maybe a new understanding of yourself that has been maybe enlightening or uplifting or somewhat surprising to you that you'd be willing to share?
Oh yeah. So Dean Graziosi and Tony Robbins do these unstoppable summits every year now. They mainly deal with people who do things like us, who want to work in the self-help industry, who want to help people become better, live their best lives, stuff like that. And one year they were doing it and Dean asked a question. It's the 7 levels of why. So why do you do what you do? And you answer the question. And then he asks you again, why do you do that? Why do you do that? And you dig down to 7 levels. And first year I did it, I don't know if I wasn't honest, if I wasn't willing to really dig into it. But after I had kids, I was more focused on changing the world for my kids. I wanted to create a lasting, not a legacy so much as a lasting environment that they could feel protected and safe in when I wasn't around. And so we did the 7 levels, and I sat there by myself after that day's lectures and worked through those 7 levels, and I would stop myself. Like I'd say something stupid, like, I want to do it because I want people to feel love. Okay, well, that's great, but that's really BS because everybody wants everybody to be loved and happy and whatever. So I finally dug down, and when I got to the 7th level, I realized my biggest fear was that when my sons grow up, they're not going to want anything to do with me, because you see that so often in our culture that the kids grow up and move on, and either they have a falling out with their parent for whatever reason. And it was so many things, and that was before I was even considering a divorce. And now that we're getting divorced, there's so many more reasons for the kids to not or to have things they don't understand, and to have issues with me or with my ex to talk about, why couldn't you stay together? Why didn't you do this for me? I picked my 5-year-old up today, excuse me, and he said, well, when are you going to live with daddy and us again? And I said, honey, we're not going to. And I had to remind him of the reasons we're not living together. And my biggest fear sitting in the car today at a red light was that he's never going to understand that. And one day he's going to blame me for separating his family, for separating him from his father all the time, or, separating him from me all the time. Whatever the situation may be, that I'm doing irreparable damage to my children, both with the temper that we talked about earlier, with my little flare ups. And mind you, I will say this: you have to swallow your pride as a parent and as a person, as an adult, because when I lose my mind or get triggered, as the joke is in our house, you have to apologize. You have to stop and get down on their level, usually within 2 seconds of me getting upset, and say, look, I'm sorry. I'm a person, mommy's a human, and I messed up. I got upset, I got triggered, and that has nothing to do with you. You did something that upset me, but that's not your fault. You weren't wrong because it bothered me. You were doing what you thought was right and what you wanted to do. And, if it was unsafe or something, fine, that's a different conversation. But I'm sorry that I was unable to control my anger. And they're like, yeah, mommy, I get it. Today, so and so, took the ball at recess, and I got really mad too. I said, did you apologize to him? And they're like, no. I said, well, maybe tomorrow we can go apologize and talk about how, like, I got upset because you took the ball. Like, I got upset because you ran through the kitchen and left your toy behind you when I was cooking dinner, and I about broke my tailbone stepping back on the stupid little Lego car or whatever. So, these little things that upset us, figuring out ways to reset personally, to work through those things, and to, I can't even think how I want to say it, to not get so down on yourself when you make a mistake, I guess is the easiest way to put it, if that answers the question.
It does. So we all, obviously, I mean, it goes without saying that we all make mistakes. We're all flawed. I can relate to that so well. I say this often that I have many great idealistic ideas and ways that I would like for things to go. But at times I can be a poor executor of those things, right? It's one thing to have a great idea on how something should go, but then when it comes time for you to actually
Right.
behave in line with that thought, that's where sometimes there's a bit of a mistake, right? A misalignment.
Right.
But I would submit something to you, Melissa, that everyone, and it sounds like, just based off of kind of what you're saying, it sounds like maybe you sometimes, like most people, can be your own worst critic, right? Sometimes you're hardest on yourself. And I would even say, be a little more gentle
Oh, yeah.
with yourself. Okay. Be a little more understanding of, you've been through some things, and it's not easy to work through those things in a real expedient fashion, right? And it's not likely that you're going to be able to speed through that and work through it, and everything's just going to come out so quickly. And at the exact same time, I know you sounds like you mentioned therapists, you mentioned right, medication and these other things. I would even say that the answer may not be with someone else.
Right. Well, it never is. I agree with that completely.
The answer might be that you already know it, that you
Right.
already deep down have the answer that you're looking for, that you spend more time. And I know you said meditation and you talked about prayer, but maybe just recognizing that whether you are or not experiencing the growth and the peace and the silence that you're looking for, just maybe a re-engagement in that, maybe a reinvestment in the amount of discipline that we have around that, just as just as kind of an invitation.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And I'm going to turn the tables on you now just for fun. I know it's your podcast, but, humor me here. When
Flip.
you decided that you wanted to do something that was going to help other people live their best life, their healthiest life, their most committed life, and etc., what made you stick with that? Because, like I said, in high school is when I got the calling to do this, to speak, to be a motivational speaker, to help people to do these things. And I, for 25 years, have come up with many reasons why I shouldn't do those things. You know, they talk about in the Bible how Moses had a speech impediment and Noah wasn't, that great or whatever. God chooses the funniest people sometimes to lead, and those reasons are what I use as excuses to not do it. So what was your deciding factor that made you go, you know what, I want to do this, I'm going to commit, and this is what we're going to do, and every day I'm going to check in with my run, and I'm going to post on Anchor Academy and all that stuff. Like, what was your deciding factor there?
Sure. First of all, thank you for doing that because it does give me a chance to share that. So I was first inspired to do this on a run, to your point. So I was on a long run. And again, the thought came to my head about how good I felt during the run, how great it was. And then I said, man, how cool would it be if I encouraged other people to also enjoy this same feeling?
Mm-hmm.
And I think you'd be surprised to know that the thought first started out with a 5K, right?
Oh,
So
wow.
5 kilometers, so a 3 mile run every day. And then I thought, well, no, that's a little bit too ambitious. That's going to be too much for certain people.
Mm-hmm.
And my mind went to a place where I said, what would be most universally applicable? Meaning, what would allow for me to cast the absolute widest net, and what would allow this concept to apply to the most people?
Mm-hmm.
And so I settled on this idea of 1K today, okay, or
Mm-hmm.
1 kilometer a day, which
Right.
for whatever reason, Americans strictly avoid the metric system every possible way. And so I know 1K is only 0.62 miles, but I, as an American, had to bump it up to 1 mile. And so I
Right.
decided on running a mile every single day. And again, I wanted to be something that was tangible, something
Mm-hmm.
that was measurable, something that was trackable, but I also didn't want it to be overwhelming, right?
Right.
So I'm in Louisiana, and so Jocelyn, my daughter Jocelyn, was just reminding me that I don't only run 1 mile, right? So I run
Right.
about a mile and a quarter. I call it the Louisiana Lanyap Mile because Lanyap just means a little bit extra, right?
Right.
And so I always run that little bit extra. But but I guess to pointedly answer the question, Melissa, like the concept itself is the framework for continuing what you started, right? Like the
Mm-hmm.
framework itself is the idea of how do you establish a pattern of behavior that allows you to keep promises to yourself. There's two things that for me happened during this process. And I know I kind of said that I don't want to give my formula so that way you would experience reality through me, but I
Right.
want to share this idea around what I feel like gets in the way of the self-esteem and the
Mm-hmm.
confidence that I feel most people would operate differently if they were to have these two things kind of taken care of. And the anchor habit actually solves for it.
Oh, nice.
Just quickly, the idea of, let's say that you're a violin player. Pick a craft, any instrument, any job function, any discipline, whatever it is. You could be a widget maker, you could be a violin player, it doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
But just take whatever your craft is. Most people out there are relatively good, if not really good, at whatever their craft is, right?
Mm-hmm.
Let's call it out of 1 out of 10. Melissa, let's say you're an 8 at playing the violin.
There you
Objectively,
go. Mm-hmm.
when I say objectively, I mean that an audience would determine that you're an 8
Right.
from a skill set standpoint. But for whatever reason, you don't show up as an 8.
Mm-hmm.
You show up with the confidence level as a 4 or a 5, maybe even a 6. Why? Because of what we talked about earlier. We're our
Mm-hmm.
own worst critic, right? And so what's the where's that gap coming from? Why does that gap exist?
Mm-hmm.
And so as I've spent time with it, I feel like that gap exists because of two reasons.
Mm-hmm.
The first reason is because we all, regardless of whether it's a TBI
Mm-hmm.
or whether it's some type of other traumatic event that occurred in our life, we
Mm-hmm.
all have stored up experiences that we have not reconciled with. And because we carry those stored up painful moments with us into our right now, we allow the grip of that pain to negatively impact how we show up today.
Oh yeah.
And so, one way of working through that is anchor habits, spending time in
Mm-hmm.
silence, and allowing those things to dissolve over time. Because what will happen is those stored up thoughts will present themselves in front of your current consciousness, present themselves in front of your current mind, and allow for you to typically, the first time it happens, you're going to react pretty
Mm-hmm.
strongly. You're going to react negatively. You're going to try and place
Right.
blame on someone else. You're going to harbor guilt or shame because of however
Mm-hmm.
you participated in that event. And so it's oftentimes a resisting type of reaction to the first time that comes back in front of your mind. Okay. My encouragement is to look at it objectively,
Mm-hmm.
shine a light on it. Don't try and place blame on anyone else, and don't accept any guilt. Just understand that that experience happened for a certain reason. And then
Mm-hmm.
your question becomes, what's that reason? And
Right.
then shut up. Allow for yourself to sit in silence and wait for the answer to that. An answer will come. You
Oh yeah.
will get a response to that answer. And sometimes that answer is simply going to be you needed to know that you're strong enough to get through something like that, and
Mm-hmm.
then be available and relatable to someone else at some future point that has
Right.
also had a similar experience, but for whatever reason they weren't able to reconcile with it, or they weren't able to feel heard by someone else. They weren't able to ever feel really seen because they
Mm-hmm.
didn't feel like anyone else could relate
Right.
until they met you.
Right.
And when you're able to lead from, essentially take a leadership role in the relationship, to let them know, hey, look,
Mm-hmm.
I know you might not think that I understand what you're going through, but let me tell you a little quick story about what happened to me 30 years ago, or 20 years
Mm-hmm.
ago, or 15 years ago. And then when
Right.
you're able to tell them your own personal experience from a first person perspective, and
Mm-hmm.
give them real insight into what you've been through, and they're able to see you here now, 15 years later, 20 years later,
Mm-hmm.
having processed that to the point to be able to talk about it,
Mm-hmm.
that demonstrates for them healing, that they can, that establishes hope for them, that they can maybe experience a similar thing for themselves at some point,
Right.
right? So maybe, just maybe, that's the only reason why you went through it.
Oh
Okay.
yeah.
That's so that's
Mm-hmm.
one half of the exercise, one half of the formula. The other reason why people aren't as confident and have as much self-esteem as they probably, as their skill set would allow them to have, right? Because remember, we're
Mm-hmm.
talking about an 8, right?
Right.
Why
Right.
wouldn't it why wouldn't an 8 or a 9 show up with the confidence of an 8 or a 9?
Right.
And it's the second piece that's also very important. How many times have we had a New Year's resolution and then broken that promise to ourselves?
By February, every year. Every year. Yeah.
And that's not an uncommon experience.
No.
That's pretty routine. And
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't just happen with New Year's resolutions. It happens with either binge drinking or binge using of some type of
Mm-hmm.
substance, or overindulging in food, to your point
Mm-hmm.
earlier, right? Just different things that you attach to, and different things that you crave, that you
Mm-hmm.
succumb to those cravings and you give into those. And then we have this regular occurrence of, oh, I'm going to start my healthy eating pattern on Monday.
Right.
I'm going to start my diet on Monday, or I'm going to start working out on Monday while you're on Saturday. And then on Monday, you work out or you eat well. And then by
Mm-hmm.
Wednesday, you've already fallen off again.
Mm-hmm.
That pattern of unkept promises to yourself
Mm-hmm.
is negatively impacting our confidence without us knowing.
Oh yeah.
And so, again, the anchor habit allows for you to stack those daily victories. So if you were to show up 90 days from now, having kept an anchor habit every day, do you think you'd be more or less confident? If you showed up 180 days from now,
Definitely more confident for sure.
if you showed up 365 days from now, having kept an anchor habit every single day, would you be more or less confident?
I'd walk onto that stage as a 10 with
Exactly.
my
There
little
you
violin.
go.
Yeah.
You'd stay a 10. But the concept is this, it's the idea that we don't give ourselves credit for those stacked victories until on a regular and daily basis unless
Mm-hmm.
there's something measurable, something trackable. And that's also part
Right.
of the value of the Anchor Academy is because I want to plug you into a community that also supports a similar philosophy and a similar psychology so that
Mm-hmm.
those other folks are on a similar path and they understand the benefit of it. And that way, if for whatever reason you might consider not doing it or might consider,
Mm-hmm.
wow, I can't make it happen today, then you have a network of people that are able to say, no, 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 you committed to doing that. It's 10
Mm-hmm.
minutes. Are you really going to lie to me right now and tell me you didn't have 10 minutes for a walk?
Right.
You can't. You can't do that, right?
Yeah.
And so the social accountability, the outside accountability is also an element that feeds the continuation of the commitment.
Yeah. And I'll say something to your first point, just real quick, with the 10 minutes of silence, which is amazing. And I know that in my mind, like that's walking during your meditation, which is something you can totally do. And when those things start coming up, I found, and like this is so cliche, and I hate that it's become cliche, but forgiveness. I heard this article or this TikTok video actually on forgiveness the other day. And in the courses I sell and the workbooks I've done, all that stuff, forgiveness is always number one because you have to forgive not just the other person, mainly you have to forgive yourself because you're not going to be able to commit to yourself, like you said in number two, if you hold shame, especially shame, if you hold guilt for something that happened in the past. And shame, like in the Brene Brown book, Atlas of the Heart, like she talks so much about shame and what that means. And if you have shame anywhere in your life and anywhere in your history because of a trauma, because of a situation that happened to you, then you're not going to be able to commit to yourself because you don't have respect for yourself. And you're going to have that problem. And what the guy said on TikTok about forgiveness is that we say that people owe us an apology because when they did something to us, they took something from us. Whether that be the ability to trust, whether that be the ability, be confident in a relationship, to be confident on stage. Like I love to sing. Whether I can or not is irrelevant. But the fact is, in high school and or middle high and junior high, whatever, I had friends tell me that I couldn't sing. So now, even if I could, terrified, won't get on the stage, karaoke night, none of that stuff, because I still have that thought in my head. I know dating people in high school and college, and even after college, things men would say to you get stuck in your head and then change your entire perception of yourself. So you have to forgive those people who owe you an apology for being, forgive me for saying it, an asshole, but you have to forgive them for that, and you're never going to get that apology. So that whole thought of closure, it sounds nice, but what you're really doing is taking back that peace. The peace that they took from you, the peace of mind, the peace of trust, the peace of love, the peace of understanding, whatever it was, you take that piece of yourself back and you forgive them, not understanding what they were doing, but you forgive yourself for letting them have that power over you for so long. Because the voices I hear in my head, my roommate up there, a lot of the things they say are things somebody else has said to me in the past, be it my parents, cousins, aunts and uncles, family members, whatever, ex-relationship people, ex-friends, whatever. That's where those voices come from. And those voices have been there for so long that I've turned them into beliefs. So it's not that the frosty and french fries at Wendy's is bad for me. It's that it makes me feel better, even though I don't like it 95% of the time. Like I never finish it because I get it and I go, why did I do this? But it's that commitment to myself because I don't believe I'm worth it. And being able to do stuff like, what you're doing with the Anchor Academy and everything else, you have to be able, like you said in point two, to commit to yourself. So you have to forgive yourself for all the past. You have to move past those negative thoughts, like you said in step one. And then you have to find the respect and the belief in yourself to commit to yourself and realize that the things that you've held as beliefs your whole life may not actually be real. Those thoughts are not, they're fleeting. They're not facts, like you said. And it opens up a new reality for you and a new perspective on life. And that is just something I pray everybody finds. And I hope the Anchor Habit is a way they could do that for sure. 10 minutes of silent walking.
It is it, and what I find, Melissa, thank you so much for sharing that. That really brought it together well because I want to overwhelmingly focus on the start. I want to overwhelmingly emphasize how important it is, not that you commit to running for the next 365 days, not that you commit to running for the next 7+ years or however long I've been running every day, but that you, whenever you hear this message, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
anyone in the audience, anyone who might be listening to this, when you hear this message, that you're willing to go on a 10-minute walk in silence right now, this moment, right? And so the movement started out with the idea of 1K today. It doesn't
Right.
say 1K every day. It doesn't say 1K every day of the year. It doesn't say 1K for the rest of your life. It says 1K today.
Mm-hmm.
Because to your point earlier, the importance around restarting with that new slate is a recommitment every single day.
Mm-hmm.
Now, don't get me wrong. I'm definitely influenced by the fact that I made the commitment way back then, but it's a new commitment every single day to what? To honor the pattern that I've involved
Mm-hmm.
myself in. I have to honor it every single day. And also too, 7+ years down the road, believe it or not, most days are very difficult. They're extremely difficult. And so when I delay it or defer it or give myself even the smallest bit
Mm-hmm.
of relief and say that and don't do it the first thing I do when I wake up, and I'm left later in the evening, or I have a certain
Mm-hmm.
schedule that means that I have to do it at night. Believe
Mm-hmm.
me, it's not simple. It's not easy. It's simple, but it's not easy. Finding the 10 minutes, but here we are, unbroken street.
Yeah, but see, that's awesome that you can admit that. As someone who's leading the movement for the anchor habit, the fact that you can say, I've been doing this for over 7 years, but every single day it's a new commitment. It's like what we do with relationships. Every day you commit that you want to be with that person and you're willing to put forth the effort to make it work. Every
Yeah,
day when I get up, I'm going to be a good mom. I'm going to try not to lose my mind with the kids. Every day when I get up, I'm going to be on my side. I'm going to be my supporter, my cheerleader, and I'm going to say, no, get your lazy butt out of this bed and go walk 10 minutes. You got this. You got this. Even though every time I walk is 30 because that's how long it takes to get around the block. But, that's the thing. You set yourself up and you remind yourself that once you're doing it, it's over. Like, you're done. In the middle of it, you're like, holy crap, I got up and started walking. Like, I'm actually doing this. It's 6 o'clock in the morning. It's still dark and I am outside walking. Like, how amazing is that? Now, I've got
that's
to practice the silent part because I'm usually jamming out to like some 2000 workout mix. But, I think
right.
the silence could be better. I think that could be beneficial once
It
I get
is
awake.
better. It is better. That's part of it. And that's you're spot on. That's the value of it, because that reinforcement on a daily basis, the commitment is the what gets you to do it. It doesn't get any easier. But then what
Mm-hmm.
also winds up happening though is you recognize that, and this is a key piece of the philosophy that comes after the fact, which is you are not stuck in whatever your current situation is. Most of the time, people are living a lifestyle that they do not agree with. I'm guilty of that. There's certain areas of my life where I have not yet gotten to a place where I'm able to demonstrate self control in that area,
Mm-hmm.
right? Whether it comes to saving or behaving a certain way with money, or whether it comes to eating or behaving a certain way with my nutrition, or whether it comes to speaking entirely honest and forthcoming and vulnerable with everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Not that you need to be vulnerable with everyone, but also just having a governor around who you choose to share certain things with. There's
Exactly.
there's still times now where, you mentioned something a second ago about maybe oversharing or sharing something that might invalidate other things that you said.
Mm-hmm.
Still fall short on things like that. Now,
Right.
would I like for it to be better? Yes. But
Yeah.
I just haven't gotten to that place yet.
Yeah.
Boom, chink in the armor, right? Not
Oh, yeah.
perfect. Surprise, not perfect, right?
And for
And
me, yeah, go ahead.
that's the nature of it though, is recognizing there that you're not stuck,
Mm-hmm.
and acknowledging that is the first step. So that's why I want the bar to be so low that
Mm-hmm.
who can tell me they don't have 10 minutes for a walk? You can have 6 jobs and 10 kids. You have
Right.
10 minutes for a walk.
Walk between
10
jobs.
minutes.
It'd be easy. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
right. You
And
were going to say
that's
something?
the thing, how I think about it is, if you, in our line of work, trying to help people, we practice and we preach vulnerability. opening yourself up to relate to other people. Like you said earlier, when you talked about sometimes the reason you have the trauma is so you can help someone else through theirs in the future. And that level of empathy. That's why I started my TikTok account, because going through a divorce seemed like something a lot of people go through these days. And that would be a way to connect with people, to have empathy and to have understanding. And they can watch me as I go through the struggle and whatnot. But I've noticed with my new mentality of vulnerability that sometimes that just becomes obnoxious. Everybody doesn't need to hear it. Everybody doesn't care. And if you think you're being helpful by sharing your story with people, like a lot of times they're going to use it against you, and they're not going to be your fan, and they're not your supporters. So you have to still be somewhat cautious in that vulnerability. And like for you and I, it's easy because we're both being equally vulnerable. So we're both putting ourselves out there, and it makes it simple. And every time we've talked, we've had this still like camaraderie thing. But with other people, you have to still guard yourself. Like vulnerable is not an free pass to tell everybody every secret ever, or post it on Facebook, for crying out loud. Like that's not what we're talking about here, because that's not
That's
going to be a
exactly
path
right.
to healing. So that's just something to keep in mind. Sometimes oversharing is just oversharing.
But so this is what does happen, and I've seen it happen in many people, and at times I've done it. But when you get comfortable
Mm-hmm.
with some of the things in your life that you haven't had comfort around ever. And when you develop that awareness and you develop that comfort because you've never shined a light on it, you haven't been aware of it, then you get so excited that you want to share it with other people
Mm-hmm.
because you have that level of comfort. But the
Right.
truth is that you need to couple that comfort with awareness and be
Mm-hmm.
aware of who your audience is, because it might not be the right time to share that, right? And
Exactly.
so most of the work that I encourage,
Mm-hmm.
as a reminder, is spend time in silence
Right.
and do it in a movement type of way. But when those revelations come in silence, it doesn't mean that whatever's revealed to you in that moment needs to be shouted from the rooftops. It also might not mean that the person who you need to forgive is ready for you to approach them about
Right.
that thing at that time. You need to be aware of where they are. And you
Mm-hmm.
need to tread lightly when it comes to, you might have an opportunity to bring it up, but for whatever reason, you might detect or be aware that they have something that's particularly challenging in their life,
Mm-hmm.
to where you know that if you were to share that with them at that moment, it might just completely collapse them. They have enough other noise that's going on in their world to where it's not the right time for you to share that with them.
Right.
And you have to be self-aware enough and aware enough of your audience to be have enough self-control to resist sharing that.
Right.
But the person that you absolutely can never, ever, ever lie to is yourself. You
Should
have
never
to
lie to.
become, what's that?
I said should never lie to. I'm really good at lying to myself. Like that's the
Well, we
skill I
all
have.
do,
Right.
right?
Right.
We all do. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. But that's part of the growth path.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why they say, I mean, you may have heard it. It's gone pretty viral. But the ex CIA guy, right, the spy,
Mm-hmm.
this guy, he talks about the three different lives.
Right.
You've got your public life, which is the one that's on social media where basically
Mm-hmm.
anyone can know, and there's a certain layer of exposure there. Certain things are shared there. Then there's your private life, which is a smaller subset of information. And
Mm-hmm.
that is the people who are closest to you. It might be family and friend. It might be, your best friend. It's
Mm-hmm.
oftentimes your spouse fits in this category, because this is still your private life, where they are they know things that the public doesn't know, but they still don't know the things that are
Mm-hmm.
in your your secret life. That's the
Right.
third layer. That is the conversation and the thoughts that only happen up
Mm-hmm.
here, that you do not share with anyone. You don't share them with your spouse. You don't share them with your best friend. You don't share them with your psychologist. You don't
Right.
share them with anyone.
Right.
They're thoughts that are perceived, and again, this is when I say perceived, they're perceived to be so uncomfortable and so
Mm-hmm.
unrelatable that no one would be able to hear that and then continue to look at you the same way.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to share those thoughts,
Right.
right? You're not going to share those thoughts. However, in the time that I've spent doing the things that I've done, I have taken an approach only in one-on-one conversations.
Mm-hmm.
This is important. It's not in a mixed crowd. It's not in a small group. It's not in front of an audience. It's
Mm-hmm.
only in one-on-one conversations where we do an exercise where I lead from the front and share very vulnerable,
Mm-hmm.
intimate, very painful things that have occurred through my life.
Mm-hmm.
And then once that other person, that singular person in that moment, once that person witnesses what real vulnerability looks like
Mm-hmm.
and the comfort to speak about something like that in a very exposed way, then they feel comfortable enough to share and reciprocate, maybe respond with a
Mm-hmm.
similar type of vulnerability. Because the healing that occurs just by offering it is enormous. It's
Oh yeah.
huge. Just by
Mm-hmm.
being able to speak and share those things is key. And obviously it doesn't happen in a setting like this, right?
Right.
It doesn't happen in a setting where a camera's rolling or whether it's
Mm-hmm.
recorded. And so one of the phrases that I use is the the most transformative moments that occur are in silence alone.
Mm-hmm.
The next most transformative statements are times of exposed vulnerability one on one in unrecorded conversations.
Mm-hmm.
Because when they're not recorded, when they're not published, and you know that there's no risk of it being repeated,
Right.
that's when you're really able to unpack some of those
Mm-hmm.
things that have been stored up in there for a long time. And it's only done very delicately. It's only
Oh yeah.
done with a certain awareness.
Right. And I'll say one thing, just to go back to your point about forgiveness and forgiving the other person and knowing your audience and is it time to talk to them about it? I have, because of situations in my life, that would be one of those one-on-one conversation revelations. I will not generally forgive or tell the person that I've forgiven them. Like for me, that's not a requirement. If I'm going through the process of working through the trauma and working through, whatever happened, I don't need you to know that I forgive you. Because sometimes, like the one time in high school when I told the person I forgave them, it started a whole new thing. Because they didn't think they were in the wrong and they got offended by that. And it never would have been the right time for them to hear, I forgive you, because it kind of sounds like a holier than thou, self-righteous mentality when you say it sometimes. So I often encourage my clients to forgive silently. And when you're running and you have one of those moments and you said you don't shout it from the mountaintop because it's a moment for you. It's a moment of clarification for you. Journaling is one of my favorite activities that I didn't even think about earlier. But writing stuff in a journal, writing down thoughts, keeping one by your bed so you can write stuff when you first wake up or if you wake up in the middle of the night, writing those thoughts down, writing a letter of forgiveness, never giving it to the person, but writing it. If you want to write it and burn it, write it and burn it, okay? If you don't want anybody to ever see it, that's fine. I'm not encouraging you to go buy one of those cute little, like, Polly Pocket lock diaries we had when we were little with a key, but have something and let your family know. Like, mine are all leather bound journals, and my kids know that when I'm dead, read away, kid. But until I'm gone, like, let's keep mommy's personal life private. But there have been some situations in my 4-year-old's life, even, that I had similar relations to. So I would go back and look at my journal and look at those entries and then remind myself exactly how I felt at that time and then try to talk to him and empathize with him that way. But the number one takeaway for me has always been forgiveness is not for them. The person who did you wrong generally doesn't even remember that it happened. And they're certainly not losing sleep over tonight. And it's not coming up in their meditations. It's not coming up in their walks or their runs. So we don't need to give them that liberation. That liberation of forgiveness is for us and for us to reclaim those parts. And they don't have to know, but if you really want to do the whole crazy stuff that you see on TikTok, I call my power back to me from every person, place, and entity. Like, I am doing this. I am taking back my power. I am taking back all my energy and my strength that everybody in my life has taken because I give it to them freely because that's who I am. But at the same time, you have to hold some for yourself. You have to maintain a level of self-love and self-awareness and self-care that gets you out of bed to walk those 10 minutes in the morning and gets you to eat right and gets you to, be there for your kids and, put up with your daughter when she's over here inspecting your ear for, like cute little bugs earlier. That was cute. To be able to have
Right.
that patience and do with the kids, like that's what you do. And that's what we're working towards, to be that kind of parent, to be that kind of friend and that kind of partner. So yeah, it was very good points.
The best thing that you can do for anyone else is work on yourself.
Amen.
Period. And when you find silence, when your silence becomes silent, your whole world changes.
It's beautiful. That is good.
Yeah. When your silent moments become silent, your whole world changes, and that's the goal, is that we can all live and operate from a place of internal silence.
Hmm.
We're not supposed to experience anger and frustration and animosity and anxiety and all that. That's not supposed to be part of our
Right.
every day. It's not. It's unhealthy. Those disruptions, those disturbances can be healed from. Right?
Hmm.
You can heal from those things. Okay. All right. Well, that's kind of all I
That's our
have. I
time.
wanted to wrap. Is there any last thoughts that you had, Melissa?
Yeah,
Anything
I
else you want
can't
to
beat
share?
that.
It's important to you.
When your silence becomes silence, your life will change for the better. Like I can't beat that. That's the perfect ending note.
It is.
It is.
All right. So one thing I agree with you. It is a good one. But one thing I will ask of you is, if let's say, and I'm guessing they would be, but let's say someone that's listening was inspired by your story and would like to connect with you,
Mm.
who might you want to connect with, or who might you be interested in hearing from? Tell us a little bit about how folks can go about getting in touch with you, and maybe tell us a little bit about the work that you do and who might be someone who should reach out to you.
Okay. I would say that my general audience is generally females between the ages of 20 and 60. I do help. I've worked with some men over time. I'm on TikTok at Miss MRS Melissa Keeney, Melissa Keeney at Facebook as well. The website is down because I'm trying to make it better and get the courses posted again. But I am mainly focusing on TikTok at this point. They can reach out and message me through that, no problem. I'm happy to give email and contact information when they reach out. I have no problem talking on the phone or anything like that. I know TikTok messaging is very, very impersonal, but my main goal is to help people process their trauma, to work through things, to find forgiveness, to find love, to, find alignment in this world, and to do things like you said, to have those silent times. And when you are able to be honest enough with yourself that your silence can become silence, it's enlightenment. Like it's nothing like it.
Yeah, beautifully said. Well, thank you again for your
Of
time,
course.
and
Thank you.
we'll get that stuff posted in the show notes for sure. And
Sounds great.
we will talk with you soon. Thank y'all for tuning in. Be cool.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.